I hope we are all sure that we are here in the transport sector team, because we have other sectors being discussed in different parts of this hotel. So please turn to the person seated next to you and tell them, are you sure, sir or madam, that you're in the right place? But anyways, very quickly, we want to get to the discussions on opportunity to showcase PPP infrastructure projects. And the one person to take us through this, of course, he has a whole team, is Mr. Kara Wainaina, external affairs expert, the National Treasury. A round of applause for him, please.
It's the most exciting session of the entire conference. We're here to discuss PPP infrastructure projects, and we have taken a deliberate decision to focus on the ones that are quite advanced. As you might be aware, the National Treasury of Kenya, working with the various government departments and agencies, has quite a long pipeline of projects. At the last count, there were 65, many of them in elementary and fairly early stages. And so we chose, for the purposes of this session, to focus on the ones that are quite advanced and the ones that will be coming in the market in the very near future. So without further ado, I'll want to introduce the team that I have to take us through this session. My name is Kara Wainaina. I'm the External Affairs Expert at the PPP unit at the National Treasury. And we'll be discussing in detail 5 projects that will be coming in the market in the next few months, as I've said. And for these projects, we have here the contracting authorities that are in charge of them. Them being road projects, they fall under the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure, more specifically under the Kenya National Highways Authority, KENHA, and the Kenya Urban Roads Authority. We have the various transaction advisors who are supporting package this project. The highway connecting the port city of Mombasa to the capital Nairobi. It's a road which is 482 kilometers, and the government of Kenya is quite keen to have this project as a design, build, finance, and operate, currently fairly not the way it should be. The next project we'll be discussing is Nairobi-Nakuru-Mau Summit. Again, a very important road in the country that connects the capital city to the western part of the country, all the way to the rest of the hinterland in the East and Central Africa. Thirdly, we want to talk about the Nairobi Southern Bypass. This is a road that was done, is just getting concluded now, done by the government, connecting the first 2 roads that I've spoken about, but helping the traffic from Mombasa Road avoid the capital, so that it's just able to join Nakuru Highway and goes on furtherward. So for the first 2 road projects, as I've said, they are DBFOs. For the Nairobi Southern Bypass, the government is looking at an operation and maintenance concession. The 4th project is the Nairobi Thika Highway, that many of us, again, are well aware was done by the government a couple of years back. And the government is now very keen to concession the operation and the maintenance of that road. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we'll want to spend some time talk about the second Nyali Bridge. Those, again, who know the Mombasa city well, Mombasa and the Nyali region is currently only connected by one bridge, the first Nyali Bridge, which was done in the 80s. And anytime you spend some travel around that bridge, we all know how sometimes it can get congested. And so the government is keen on doing a second bridge over that area, again, as a DBFO. Let me just introduce the various transaction advisors. We are having consortiums as transaction advisors for this project. On Nairobi Mombasa transaction, as Patrick has said, this is under PricewaterhouseCoopers as the lead transaction advisor. We have the legal as Dentons and HHM. On the technical side, we have Steer Dave, High Point, and Howard Humphrey. And then on the environmental and social advisor for the project, we have Africa Waste and Environmental Management Center. So that's the transaction advisor who is advising on that project. On Nairobi Nakuru Mau Summit, we have international consultants and technocrats in India. with Grant Thornton as the financial advisor, Shitali and Shitali, India as the legal advisors, ICT PVP as the technical advisors, and then we have GeoDev Kenya advising on the environmental of the project. On Nairobi Southern Bypass, we have CPCS, which is who are the lead transaction advisors. We have Diane Blair on the financial, MMAN on the legal, and ENS Africa. On the technical, we have Ruton International, Peter Davidson, and on environmental, we have Otieno, Odongo, and partners. On the Nairobi Thika Road, again, international consultants and technocrats of India are more or less with the same partners that they have on Nairobi Nakuru. On the second Nyali Bridge, Deloitte Kenya is the lead transaction advisor. We have IKM advocates on the legal together with Cliff Decker Hoffmeyer. And with in the technical, Gulf Engineer, and in environmental, we have Earthcare Services Limited. So I think that's just the team which is advising and supporting package these projects, offering the three main areas, doing feasibility studies which are concluded, doing the transaction documents, and supporting the procurement process. So I now want to invite from PwC, Patrick Masharia, to give us a bit of more detail as regards Nairobi-Mombasa Highway. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
In terms of the structure, it's going to be a DBFO, but combined with a lot of O&Ms, because as currently as we stand, there are other contracts that are ongoing where government has contracted, EPCs to construct on the same road. So there will be some contracts that are O&Ms, and I'll go into more details on that. And there are others that are going to be DBFO. It's a 30-year concession period. That's sort of in terms of the estimated length of the concession period. In terms of phasing, we're looking at 2 phases. Now, because we've done a lot of traffic studies on this road, and as you know, sometimes, you don't want to, build so much capacity before, traffic, gets to a certain level. So what we are doing is that we are going to have a phase 1, which will estimated to start in January 2018 to December 2019. And that phase will involve, rehabilitating the existing alignment. And now once we hit a certain level of traffic 7 years later, we are going to do a phase 2. And the phase 2 will involve getting another lane, in addition to the existing lane. So it will be a dual carriageway all the way. But as you might know, that there are sections of the road that are already dual carriageway, and those could also be expanded. Going to the next slide. Right. So, as I said, that's a long road. 482 kilometers is a long road. So, in terms of how this project is going to be, taken out to market, we are looking at 3 or 4 packages, and I'll just, describe each of them, to you. So, Nairobi to Machakos, if you've driven on this road, and I assume maybe most of us have, so between Nairobi to the river, you probably see it's already a dual carriageway. It's a very nice road. So that could go out as an O&M. But further down, up to where Machakos turnoff is, that could be a DBFO, right? And then going further down, there will be another section between Kibwezi to Voi, which will now that will be proper DBFO, because there you have to do all the carriageway. And between Voi and Mariakani, again, that's another DBFO. But between Mariakani and Mombasa, because there are some contracts that are going to be issued by government, then that will be an O&M. So, because the road will already have been constructed by government. So, looking at that split, then it becomes, easy, nice chunks for the market to accept, rather than, putting out the full package out at the same time. And if you look at the cost, as I said, the concession period is 30 years. The cost for the first phase is estimated at about $1.3 billion, and the cost for the second phase is about $1.02 billion. So, all that's totaling to about $2.35 billion. I see Jim. It's not very small. Yeah. It's a very small project. Yeah. So now I know the other issue a lot of you will ask me is how much is there land acquisition and all that. Yes, there will be. Initially, probably not as much, because as I said in the first instance, you're just rehabilitating the existing alignment. But in the end, we estimate about $200 million of land acquisition that is required. But there's already a right of way. But since in the cases where you're dueling, you're probably expanding that right of way from 60 meters to about 100 meters. So you have to buy sort of the extra land. In terms of packaging, and this is, as I said, this is an estimate. We are looking at getting the first package out in the next, by about April 2017. Package 2 from about January 2017. 2017. So, again, this is an estimate, right? As we go on, we are going to, flesh these out. But in terms of the structure and the size of the project, and I think what we need to know for now, that's it. But I'm ready to take questions either now or later.
Thank you very much, Patrick. The next project we'll be talking about Nairobi Nakuru Mau Summit, and Marcel is here to take us through.
Thank you. A somewhat smaller project, though not less important. Nairobi Nakuru Mau Summit. That's a length of about 174 kilometers. The road at the moment is a single carriageway. As such, the condition is fair to good. But the problem is, it's a hilly terrain. And when you have all these freight vehicles using this road, it will take you on average 4 hours to get from Nairobi all the way up to Nakuru. Traffic as such is fairly reasonable. On certain sections of the road, 15,000 vehicles per day. In Nakuru itself, that could go up well to 40,000 vehicles per day. It is recognized apparently as one of the unsafest roads in the world. There's a list of 22 unsafe roads. This one is on it. Main reason, single carriageway, hilly terrain, a lot of freight. You want to take over the freight, the slow-moving vehicles, and you get in a mess. So the plan is to widen this road. And yes, it's part of the northern corridor, same as Mombasa-Nairobi. The plan for this project is the following. We want to implement this project as a PPP, design, build, finance, operate, transfer, for a period of 30 years. So we're going to invite the private company to arrange the necessary financing up to the amount of initially a 650 million US dollar. He will be able to recover his cost through availability payments throughout the period of operations. Availability payments being periodic payments that are subject to predefined performance indicators. Availability of the road, but also the service level that is being provided. The 174 kilometers refers to Rironi all the way up to Mau Summit. In addition, we have recommended to expand the scope also with the strengthening of the B3C88 road. That's a parallel road that is part of the entire road configuration between Nairobi and Nakuru. Also, Gitaro-Rironi section that is somewhat closer to Nairobi, that is already being upgraded at the moment, so we have recommended to include operation and maintenance in the package. And obviously the operation and maintenance of the highway. So 650 million for the initial widening. There are augmentations scheduled for 2025, 2030, taking into account the expected traffic growth, which are likely to cost an additional 500 million. Revenue streams for the concessionaire will be availability payments, and we're talking about a 30-year concession. The targeted timetable is, the plan is to launch the request for qualification in October. Hopefully, if there are a lot of bids, we will have the shortlist, and we will issue the request for proposal end of this year. The target is to have the bid submission by June 2017, have some negotiations, have the commercial close by August 2017, and try to achieve financial close by December 2017. That's the plan for Nairobi Nakuru Mau Summit.
The road that we're looking at is already built. I'm sure some of you have been on it. I've got a map here showing the road. So we start down here at Mombasa Highway. For those of you less familiar with Nairobi, the airport is down in this area. And it continues all the way through Langata, down through the forest, the Nairobi forest, and over Gong Road, and all the way up to Kikuyu. So the road itself is 28.6 kilometers. It's a dual carriageway highway. Construction started in 2012 and is nearly complete. The surface is finished for the entire segment. There's a few minor things that need to get fixed up, but otherwise the road is operational at present. There's also 8.5 kilometers of service roads. There's 6 interchanges, including Mombasa Highway and up in Kikuyu. We have Langada, we have Gong Forest, we have Dagoretti, Thogoto interchanges. We're looking here at a 10-year O&M contract. This will cover the routine maintenance of the road, drainage, lighting, slopes, litter barriers, etc. We're expecting some small capital works to be included in this contract. Central barrier down the center of the road, some additional fencing to be included around the road, especially in Gong Forest. We're also looking at some animal bridges. So there'll be some minor capex involved in the road as well. We expect it to be an availability-based payment and an output-based performance contract. So RFQ we're looking at launching very, very soon, followed by the RFP a couple months later. Bid submission in March 2017, commercial close in May 2017, followed by financial close in July of next year. So it's quite a bit smaller than the big roads projects, but again the road is complete and it's ready to go to tender very soon for the O&M contractor.
Called Super Highway, one of the nicest road or highway built in Kenya, in the city of Nairobi to a satellite town called Thika here, and it started from Uhuru Highway, and it is going through the most urbanized sections of the city of Nairobi as well as the semi-urban sections too, going towards the Thika, and carries a lot of traffic. If we see as a kind of sketchy thing, it's the road. This is the Uhuru Highway, which is in the city of Nairobi, and the 3 urban legs. One is Forest Road, Muranga Road, and Gara Ring Road, connecting at a junction called Pangani Roundabout. So from there, it goes all the way towards Thika, crossing the highly urbanized sections of near Kasarani, and then going to Riruru and Juja, up to Thika town, and going about 2 kilometers beyond Thika overpass. So the place called Blue Post Hotel. So it's the, as most of you already know, that this road is already operational, and we are looking for a on-dam concession for this highway. Looking at the broad project structure, yes, it is on availability payment, and there are a few capex involved to a tune of around 35 million USD, which includes construction of few foot of bridges, installation of street lighting, installation of highway traffic management system, and some geometric improvements at few of the intersections, and obviously the main thing is the O&M of the highway, meeting the KPIs defined in the contract. And concession, we're looking at 10 years of O&M concession for this highway. And for the tentative schedule for the procurement, we're looking very soon releasing pre-qualification document in this month itself. Then after the evaluations of the pre-qualification shortlisting of the bidders, then RFP in November 2016, bid submission somewhere around March 2017, commercial close in May, and maybe financial close in June or somewhere close to that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is John from Deloitte to take us through the Seganyali Bridge.
Thank you, Kara. As Kara mentioned, the Seganyali Bridge is planned to help with congestion in Mombasa, which is highly important to the economy of not just of Kenya, but also for the whole of East Africa. The bridge, the nature of the bridge means that it's going to be an urban road, so very different from the Northern Corridor DBFOs that we've heard about from both the Nairobi-Mombasa and the Nairobi-Nakuru to Mount Summit roads. Primarily from commuter traffic, helping to link the north coast mainland of Mombasa to Mombasa Island. The objective is to reduce congestion in the area, to help people to get to particularly to the commercial business district, and to promote economic growth. Already at the moment, on the existing bridge, which was designed and constructed in 1979-80, there is traffic which is very, very close to the design capacity, not just of the bridge itself, but to the connecting roads. So that needs to be spread out to have alternative routes into the CBD to enable traffic to flow and to give a better service to the people of Mombasa. So what is proposed? At the moment, the conceptual design has been prepared on the basis of a suspension bridge to link the island to the North Coast mainland. That's about 600 meters. It's relatively close to the existing bridge, but provides an alternative route. The estimated cost of that is of the order of 200 million. Primarily, the most of the cost is in the bridge itself, although there is some connecting roads, because what became clear fairly early on was that the bridge itself doesn't fulfill the functions. It needs connecting roads additionally to be enhanced. So that's about 8 kilometers of additional road to help distribute the traffic and create traffic flow. Project structure, an availability-based payment, very similar to the other projects that we've been talked about, to have a 30-year concession period, government to pay for those availability of the road, and performance based on that. And I think that Engineer Kamau, the director of the PPP unit, was here yesterday and talked a lot also about tolling, and it's planned that the payment for the roads is partially funded through tolling of the bridge. In terms of timing, looking to come out to procurement at the end of the year and to drive that forward as fast as possible. So obviously slightly later than the O&M projects because it's more complex, but looking to progress that as quickly as possible.
Presentation on different packages, some of those, particularly on Nairobi, Mombasa. Some of those packages we're still fine-tuning, so they may end up being slightly different. But the notion of splitting the projects into manageable, sizable pieces is still there. The issue of land acquisition is a factor that we need to take into account on both Nairobi, Mombasa, and Nairobi, Nakuru. So, for example, Nairobi, Nakuru, up to Nakuru itself, there's very little land that needs to be acquired, but beyond it, there's quite a lot. Yeah, and the bit beyond Nakuru is a relatively small section, so we don't want that to delay the procurement of the rest. So we're looking at that, and similar issues on Nairobi, Mombasa. In terms of timetable, you saw the timetables put up by the transaction advisors. We are in the middle of producing all the procurement documents: RFQ, RFP, concession agreement, PayMec, etc., etc., etc. You guys all know how much work that involves, but it is ongoing, and it has been ongoing for some time. So on all the documentation, we're at the stage where we have reasonably decent drafts, yeah? Not good enough to share them with bidders yet, but we're getting there. So these timetables are fairly realistic. And we want to be ambitious. We want to get these projects into the market. Just one clarification on Nairobi, Mombasa. The timetables put there are a bit out of date. We want to get all of the projects launched within this calendar year. We fully recognize that procurements cannot run entirely in parallel because there's too many and etc., etc., etc. But at least we want to get the projects into the market, even if we then stagger the later stages. Yeah. So that will also be coming to market this year. I just wanted to add that to what's been said. But now we're open for questions.
We can take 3 questions per round, and then if you you may direct the question to the person you want to take your question. Johnson is right behind there with another microphone, so just raise up your hand and ask your question. You can have the first question. Yes.
For the DBFOs, what would be your estimated cost for all those projects on an annualized basis? And is it all going to be additional debt before the tolling kicks in? And then I just had a question on clarity for the annuity program. If the projects are going to be done FCY and we're repaying LCY, is there any change to what had been proposed earlier for the highways, financing of the highways?
For the 3 DBFOs, if you add them all up, we get to a little over $3 billion in total, but that includes what we call augmentation. So for example, on both, Patrick was talking about on Nairobi Mombasa and also on Nairobi Nakuru, there is an initial phase which needs to be financed immediately, which is dualizing, let's say, on Nairobi Nakuru. But there is an expectation that traffic growth will take us to the need for 6 lanes in 6 years, 7 years, 8 years' time. We don't know. So we'll introduce a traffic trigger into the contract to allow that augmentation. If you strip out the augmentations, because they're traffic dependent, then the amount of CapEx sort of on day one, if you like, from day one, once the projects are closed, I think comes to a little over 2 billion, 2.2, 2.3 billion, if I remember rightly. In terms of what that works out annually, I have no idea. We'll have it in a spreadsheet somewhere, but whereas those big numbers are off the top of my head, the annual ones I can't quite remember. In terms of will this add to government debt, this is not sovereign borrowing, yeah? This is PPP financing. So the debt will be an obligation of the PPP company. Government's obligation will be to pay the availability payments subject to performance being met to the PPP company. How that ends up being accounted for by the government of Kenya is dealt with by a department of which I'm not a part, but it's not strictly sovereign debt. In terms of, you asked a question about local currency financing. It will be up to the bidders to decide how they want to finance the projects. The availability payments will be denominated in shillings, but there will be hedging, there will be protection within the payment mechanism, so that forex risk actually comes back to government. Yeah, that will be the structure.
We have not done a detailed design. What we have done is a preliminary design that will also be provided to the prospective bidders as a reference design, with the option you can use this design, or if you have suggestions to improve it, obviously you are free to do so. With regard to the land acquisition issue, yes, we have surveyed what we need to acquire. So there has been a detailed survey, plot by plot. It has taken us a year. And I think we have now come to the conclusion that for indeed Nairobi up to Nakuru, only a limited number of plots needs to be acquired. So most of the right-of-way is available. After Nakuru, it becomes a bit more complicated. So indeed, there will have to be some more plots to be acquired. But there is a huge spreadsheet with all the plots that have been identified and the owner, and verified with the respective authorities.
So on Nairobi Mombasa, in terms of the designs, it's exactly the same, right? You get an outline design. It's not warranted. You have to do your own, as a bidder, you have to do your own designs, right? On the land issue, we've done exactly the same. We have a spreadsheet that has every plot that is between Nairobi and Mombasa. And for us to come up with a number that I showed you in terms of the $200 million, that number actually includes the acquisition of land and relocating the people who are along the alignment. So it's a very detailed work that has been done, which took us probably less than a year, but very close to a year. So I think now the next step is just to start, for land commission and everyone involved in the land acquisition, whatever, to start, relocating the people. I think that's pretty much, on point.
Didn't introduce myself at the outset. I'm a partner with PwC working on Nairobi, Mombasa. I just wanted to add on the land acquisition issues that we actually have the whole design, the reference design that we have done for Nairobi to Mombasa is based upon a corridor that we believe is there, that was provided to us by the contracting authority, Kenha. and that is what the design is based upon. The additional land that is required, that we are referencing to the 200 million roughly of land acquisitions and plot by plot, is when the reference design is going outside of that corridor. So I just wanted to say that it's not, there is an existing corridor that we believe Kenha does own along that. It differs by stretches. Sometimes it's 50, 80, 100 meters, and that's what we based it on. And the additional land that we require is when that particular design, that we've come up with goes outside of that additional corridor. Verification of all of that, etc., is, as Patrick said, will be up for Kenha to provide.
The good news is that that land acquisition is of a very short distance. So there is a relatively small number of plots which will be required in order to be able to deliver that. The contracting authority is working to progress that at the moment. Similar fashion, we have done the detailed survey looking at the plots which will be required, how much of those plots, the actual area which within those plots. So that is all there. And the contracting authority is working on progressing that land procurement. Beyond the immediate approach roads, there is another section which there is potential for that to follow in parallel with procurement, because there is a further approach road which can enable the bridge to be of use, although not to the full extent. So there is a schedule to enable the procurement to progress expeditiously, and with land, some of that land acquisition to go in parallel. I should also mention that land acquisition is also envisaged to be government risk. So this is not an area where we expect the private sector to be taking that risk.
How do you overcome risk that there's some sort of failure between the designs, between different sections? And some sort of benchmarks you've used to determine these performance standards and quantums related to these performance standards?
The system will probably be run by the same tolling operator. So in terms of connecting through the various sections, I don't think that should be a problem.
The same standards, it's Kenya's standards for building roads. So that's the starting point for each bidder. Indeed, when they're submitting their bids, they may well possibly come up with outline designs which are perhaps not compatible. But as long as they meet the standards, it's fine. There is a process after the winning bidder has signed the concession agreement whereby the detailed design has to be approved by the independent expert and the contracting authority. And quite clearly, one of the factors that's going to be taken into account is whether it's compatible with a neighbouring highway. I think it's also important to note that where we split these packages, we're not going to do it in the middle of a junction. Yeah, we're going to do it on a stretch of relatively straightforward highway. So we're not going to create unnecessary complexities at the transition points. Yeah. Whilst I'm stood up, you'd asked a question about tolling. We recognise concerns over government payments. One answer to that is the best credit in Kenya is government credit. So if anyone wants to do business in Kenya, they better get used to trusting government that they will pay. So that's one answer. I get paid on time most of the time. Sadly, my fees are not quite as high as the availability payments. But nonetheless, you raise a valid point. And the point is, these roads will generate revenue. Yeah. So I can't tell you precisely the structure we will end up with, but there is kind of agreement in principle that there will be a sort of ring fencing of the toll revenues from these projects, and the availability payments will have a first charge on those tolls. Inevitably, there will not be a perfect match year on year, so there's gaps to fill. Maybe in due course there will even be surpluses. Yeah. So we're not saying that that concessionaires will not have to rely on government credit. They will, but there will be a kind of a ring-fenced source of funds, which we hope gives bidders some comfort.
We are quite used to projects with availability payments. I think we have now done a dozen or so, and these projects are being done all over the world. And obviously, UK, the Netherlands, but also, for example, in India, there's the BOT annuity program, quite a substantial number of projects that have been implemented under this regime. So obviously we are learning from these experiences in defining the respective performance standards, tailoring them to the specifics here in Kenya, because we don't quite have the issue of getting rid of wild animals in the Netherlands. And that might be an issue here in Kenya.
We're talking two types of standards. One is the construction standards, design and construction standards in the first place. And we have those already. You know, there's all sorts of standards. So clearly that's what we're being guided by. To the extent that the teams feel that there's something missing within those Kenyan standards, then we refer to other standards. So for example, as I understand it from ICT, there are no standards in Kenya for a 6-lane highway. There is for a 4-lane highway, but not for 6. So we've kind of had to look for other best practice. So that's on the construction and design side. On the performance and operating standards, we haven't had Kenyan guidance for that, so we're looking at best practice. We need to strike a balance. We don't think, that these need to be good roads, yeah, because we're going to charge people to use them, yeah. So we want a high quality road, both in terms of its condition, but then in terms of how it's looked after. So we are setting reasonably high standards, but at the same time we're aware that the higher the standard, the higher the cost, and there's an affordability issue. So that's the kind of the balance that we're trying to strike. But the references have been, UK, European, Indian, US for some of them. This isn't my area, I'm not an engineer, but I've been involved in the meetings, yeah? So I think it's fair to say that common sense and best practice is being applied to developing standards.
I think it's exciting to see so many projects coming to the market, and I think it's about time. We all want to get ourselves involved in these transactions that have been here for a while. A point I'd like to get clarity on and maybe understand deeper is, with so many transactions, you have usually the same set of documents, concession contract, implementation, or other direct agreement. With different teams working on different projects, is there a process to either conform the boilerplate clauses or documents and having some type of standardization across the projects in order to promote efficiency in running these processes and negotiation both on government and the private sector side? Whilst recognizing that each project is different technically, but there are certainly commonalities across all of the projects. And experience has shown us the standardization, particularly in the UK as well as in South Africa, where documents were standardized, the market accepted those as bankable documents, and the speed of project execution reduced significantly when we got to that point. Thank you.
It's an intensely painstaking process to get a large group of people, 4 different transaction advisors, 5 different projects, all from different backgrounds. Our TAs have a lot of experience in India, in Europe, etc. So it has been a painful exercise, but we have done precisely what you've described with precisely the objective that you've described. I mean, I think we would take it as a personal embarrassment if we had a multiplicity of different formats of documents. It's not to say that we'll get it perfectly right. At some point we have to say, okay, this is the standard. Now each TA tailor it to their project, and that is an opportunity for maybe there to be a few differences, but the fundamental objective is exactly as you describe. Although, as I said, we will be launching the projects pretty much all together, or in a relatively short space of time, we do know that the procurements will end up being phased inevitably. Some of the projects are easier, some of them are harder. We don't want to dump $2 billion of financing onto the market, all of that stuff. So we will also use the dialogue processes within the procurements on the first projects to inform. So if we agree to sensible changes on the concession agreement in one project, we'll share that back with the other teams to the extent they haven't reached that point. So again, we improve as we go. I'm sure you appreciate it's not easy, but the objective is absolutely there. Yeah.
When it comes to Nairobi, Mombasa, or particular side, we will highlight the exact section that is different to the you know, the standard ones, so you don't have to read through the whole thing. Yeah. I mean, I know you will anyway, but just...
motorists are driving at 200 kph, mph. So the road is crazy. I don't know whether at the time of the process you had looked at those kind of issues, the social aspect in terms of the issue of traffic. It's very sad. We have an average of about 100 fatalities every month on Thika superhighway. And what is being done about it?
We have to have improve the geometrics, we have to improve the pedestrian crossings, and at the same time the other feature for safety of the passenger, like highway traffic management system. If there's some kind of a fatal accident, it needs a quick action to take the victim to the hospital, because most of our death is because of that lack of first aid. Because the accident happens, and any highway in the world, death is because of the lack of time or taking that person to giving a first aid. Or those kind of features are being introduced into the project, which will be part of a kind of a KPI for the concessionaire who's going to manage this highway. So it will be key performance indicators. The safety of the highway, safety of the pedestrians will be one of the key performance indicators linked to the different features which are going to be implemented on the highway.
Before separately procured by Kenha as a construction project, yeah? What our responsibility is to bring in the operations and maintenance contractor to now look after the road. But because of exactly the same issues you've highlighted, we've looked at how we can improve, in a sense, what we've inherited and address the kind of issues that you've highlighted. So when Verk was presenting, or there was mention of some capex. It's an O&M project, but there was $30 or $50 million of capex. The kind of thing that is for more foot-over bridges and so forth, to try and address the weaknesses that were originally there in the original design and construction. Yeah. So through an O&M contract, we're doing the best we can to fix the problems that were left with the original design of that project. And as far as the other roads that are being built under these projects, so Nairobi, Nakuru, Nairobi, Mombasa, I mean different highways, but they still have urban sections. I think it's fair to say that the lessons learned from the weaknesses in the design of Nairobi Thika have been taken into account into the outline design for those projects. I hope that helps clarify.
My questions are the following. I would like to know the level of involvement of the contracting authorities, especially the project governance structures for the different projects in terms of the project officer, the different project. You have a different project officer for the different projects, and then of course those contracting authorities. Because yesterday we had a discussion in terms of capacity within the public entities in management of some of these projects. I want to understand the level of involvement of the contracting authorities in this, in the different projects. And then the other one is to follow up on the availability, because I think all the projects are based on availability. So I would want to understand the government appetite to take up all these projects and the PPP arrangement, and most of them are coming on board almost at the same time. I don't know how far these discussions have gone. The other one, the willingness to pay studies, because I've seen, I think they're going to be toll roads, all of them. So the willingness to pay studies for all these roads, what are the indicative figures on this? And then experiences from other countries like Australia, even South Africa. Most of the toll roads, there's normally a public, a negative response in terms of usage of these roads. In Australia, I think in Melbourne, one of the projects that was launched as a PPP, the motorists all avoided to use the road, and the private party who was involved in this road was I think he ended up being either bankrupt or something. So I want to understand the level of engagement of the motorists in terms of usage of this road, because 5 toll roads coming on on the market at the same time, have you done any stakeholder engagement to involve them to say that most of these roads are going to be tolled roads, especially for the roads that they're already using that are not tolled? So somebody wakes up in the morning and finds out that the road is actually tolled and he's supposed to pay for it, and yet previously he was not paying for it. Thank you very much.
Essentially have two. Kenha, which is responsible for 4 of the projects, and Kura, which is responsible for the bridge. And fundamentally, the term is contracting authorities. These are their projects, and they will be the signatory to the concession agreements. In terms of how that is being managed from a governance point of view, each of the projects has, let's use the word project manager, it's a team leader or what have you, who is designated to each project. Let me say designated, not dedicated. Yeah, and that is a bit of a challenge. Both organisations, are not used to doing PPPs. They have plenty of other things to do. So it has been a challenge for us, always getting the time of the people that we need. So I would say that the right structures are probably in place, but the demands on people's time has sometimes been a factor. I think we've managed to get through that, with the work of the transaction advisors, the role of the PPP unit, etc. At times we've muddled through, but we've got through. I think the critical point is, though, that clearly preparing a project, the feasibility study, is the easy part. Procurement and ultimately management of the PPP contract, we cannot afford vacuums in that role. So I won't say that we're in a position where we have in place the right project management structure or contract management structure for these contracts, because at the moment we don't. But we know it's a to-do, and it's a to-do that will be done in parallel with the procurements. I hope that sort of answers that part. On the tolling, so let me just say, a lot of work has gone into tolling. Yeah. First of all, each of the transaction advisors have and I won't ask them all to speak because it'll be pretty much the same answer, but maybe 1 or 2 of them can. All of the transaction advisors have looked at the traffic. They've done willingness to pay surveys. They've looked at the journeys that people are making, etc., etc., etc. There's also an affordability assessment. So all of them kind of on specific projects have looked at tolerance to toll levels, attitudes to tolls generally, etc. We also commissioned a separate piece of work by another advisor who isn't here to develop a national tolling policy for Kenya, which is beyond these projects. That will be applicable on whichever road Kenya ultimately wants to toll, whether it's a PPP or not. That tolling policy has not yet been approved by Cabinet, which is why I'm not in a position to share too many details of the contents. But suffice to say, it is a good policy, and we're optimistic that it will be adopted. In terms of the proposed toll levels, I think that's one thing that I can't share with you at the moment, because essentially it's part of that document. One thing I will say is what has gone into the recommended toll levels is all the willingness to pay work that's been done by these transaction advisors, as well as looking at international benchmarks, both within Africa and outside. We've also looked at the costs imposed by different types of traffic on a highway. Lorries cause more damage than cars, for example. And we've also looked at the economic benefits of users in terms of time and cost savings to inform. So a lot has gone into coming up with the numbers. It's just I can't share with you what the numbers are at the moment.
When you did our willingness to pay, there's a lot of willingness from the truckers, because obviously they lose a lot of time on the road. I think very recently there was a 24-hour jam or 30-hour jam, and that's costly to a business person. So you'll find that the extent of willingness may vary from project to project, but there's a lot of that willingness to pay if they can be saved the time that a container takes from Nairobi to Malaba to Kampala. I mean, it's sort of same case applies to your Kampala Jinja. So you might find some differences.
Sekinyali Bridge. We have held meetings with local residents, associations, with business groups within Mombasa when we were talking about the preferred location of the bridge. And as part of those meetings, we specifically identified that it was planned to be a tolled bridge. And I was pleasantly surprised, if not amazed, that actually that didn't get the level of opposition that you typically would expect to get, but almost the acceptance of that tolling is likely to be necessary for new infrastructure. So it is something that we have already started to sensitize people on, that there is the likelihood that you will see tolls on bridges, and that this is an aspect of where there is new infrastructure, that may have to be the case.
Resistance of people towards toll roads, which indeed takes place all over the world. And it's going to be a challenge for the government, because as the government, we need to explain to the people that if we are not going to toll the roads, nothing is going to happen. The roads are not going to be improved. We need to have that source of revenues for improving the roads and ensuring a sustainable maintenance of these roads. And the interesting thing with regard to the specifics for Kenya in comparison, for example, with Melbourne or any other developed country, is that the number of alternatives available to the users here in Kenya is substantially less. So if you look at my project, Nairobi to Nakuru, there are not that many alternatives available to the people. So if you want to go from A to B, this is it. And the most important thing is that we need to demonstrate to the people that we're going to use your money to improve the road. Rather than having 4 hours of travel time, you now have 2 hours of travel time. Your vehicle operating costs, your fuel costs will be substantially less. Your safety, the risk of accidents will be substantially less. And we ask you merely for a small contribution of all these benefits you're going to experience to allow the government to pay for the necessary improvements. And that's also a matter of marketing of the project and the necessary tolling.
The traffic on them and in and around them at the moment is awful. Yeah? Nairobi Mombasa is dangerous, Nairobi Nakuru is dangerous, there are huge queues, Mombasa is congested, etc., etc., etc. So with those projects, we're actually solving a very real and visible and significant problem. So we hope we can sell the idea of tolling, because actually we didn't toll, couldn't do it. Yeah, we face a bigger challenge on Nairobi Thika, which was built and completed some years ago, and Southern Bypass, which is not quite complete, but people are using it. And I think everyone would agree, had we been able to toll those roads immediately they were completed, that would have been the ideal situation. That wasn't done. We are where we are, and you rightly identified a greater challenge that we will have in convincing people that it's still worth paying, and that's a to-do for us.
The one point I wanted to make about willingness to pay compared to Melbourne and some of these other countries, in addition to what John said on availability, is that you do have a very different demographic curve in Kenya and in Africa in general, going in exactly the opposite direction to the West or Europe, for instance, where you have a declining population, etc., etc. So if you take a very long-term view, you know, the dynamics behind that's driving willingness to pay and an increasing population and a growing economy should actually be to the benefit of these roads and tolling than compared to the West.
Well, I think so far there are about 350,000 court cases in court of people just not paying, right? And I agree, it's an educational process, but I think it's going to be extremely difficult, because in South Africa, Joburg is just mass disobedience of people not paying, including myself when I'm there.
These will not be post-paid toll systems. We will not monitor people and then send them a bill like a utility and then ask them to pay. These will fundamentally be pay-as-you-go. I'm not saying that solves the problem. I'm not saying that all of a sudden makes them popular, but it helps us avoid getting to the extremes that you guys have had in Gauteng. Yeah.
A couple questions maybe. Do you intend to launch these projects in the form of a formal roadshow, for example? It's one question. And to what extent, if any, are you trying to mobilize the interest and the participation in IFI lenders and things like that? I think it goes without saying they need to be catalysts for this. You have a very ambitious timetable. Be nice to know how you envision that.
In mid of our coming month, and I think there's been a bit of work happening behind the scenes in planning that conference. But yes, we do looking forward to getting all across the different players that would be keen on an investor conference, financiers, the firms keen on operating and maintaining and building the roads. So you'll be hearing a lot from us, and I do request to get all your cards at the end of this session. Thank you.
There's lots of development banks, but with quite a few of them, about 3 or 4 weeks ago in Nairobi, and that was the beginning of a process of direct engagement with them. So we're not going to just let you guys talk to the banks and say you sort it out. Ultimately, you'll be raising the finance, but our intention is to facilitate that process as much as possible and bring those banks, all banks actually, anyone who wants to give us money, come along. We want to engage them as closely as possible because they're critical, as you highlight.
Let us take that break, and then when we come back, we'll take exactly 1 hour. So 2 p.m., please, let's kindly be here so that we can kick off on time. Thank you so much once again.